we all have an opportunity to save others, given, like we say in recovery, we shall not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it, because it is our greatest strength in helping others who feel unique, who don't think that anyone can understand how special they are, because someone else in the rooms have had that experience and can smash that idea that they're somehow different from everyone else.
Welcome to This Helps, where we sit down with the world's leading helpers to find out how they're helping and also what helps them. By the end of this episode, you'll have practical tools to improve your own mental health. I'm Marlon Morgan, founder and CEO of Wellness Together, an organization dedicated to improving the mental health of thousands of people every day. Join me and my insightful Gen Z co-host Hannah Ravitch as we sit down for authentic and vulnerable conversations with people dedicated to helping others. What helps? Let's find out. Thanks for sticking around, for being with us. How incredible is Patrick Kennedy? He has devoted so much time and effort to using his platform, his political office, to simply being helpful. I honestly don't know of one thing that he's done that hasn't been. I'm sure there is, and Amy's not here to tell us, but for far as I know, he's done so many incredible things. When I first got a chance to meet Patrick, Jeremiah and I were nervously kind of like sweating at this event and said, "Oh, I think that's Patrick Kennedy over there, I think." And I said, I'm pretty sure it's him because he looks just like a 50-cent piece. So I'm pretty sure that's Patrick. And but while I was saying that joke that he approved beforehand, he came over and tapped my shoulder and said, "Hi, I'm Patrick." And I almost said, "Hi, I'm nobody, but nice to meet." Yeah, hello, Patrick Kennedy. But he is a genuinely wonderful, caring, open person who finds power in vulnerability. It's incredible to know him. So glad to have him here. So welcome, Patrick.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
We usually start this podcast by asking your perfect day. If you're in need of a little bit of self-care, I know you travel a lot. You've been flying all around. You flew here today. What is the perfect self-care day? What does it look like for you? And we have to start, and actually, let's start the night before. What time do you go to bed?
Well, I have 5 children, and the younger 4, 12, 10, 8, and 6, we put them to bed at 8:30. And I do my best to make sure I hit the lights within an hour of that.
Nice. Okay.
Because I like to get up early. I also have commitments in my 12-step group, which require me some days of the week to get up early to help run meetings.
Excellent. Wow. Okay. So this day, when you wake up, does your perfect self-care day include one of those meetings?
Well, this morning it did. I'm adjusting always. The time change is not always good for mental health. And running around and all that stress of going in and out of airports and stuff. But at least I'm aware of that. I know how to, thanks to living in this time of the world, I can just push my meeting guides app.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I can zoom in right away. I've got New York on my guide. I've got Chicago an hour earlier. I've got Denver. And I've got Los Angeles. I can get a meeting any day. Any time in the day.
Any time zone.
Any time zone. And wherever I am. And it can really help reset me.
I love
for the rest of
the commitment to self-care, knowing what you need, knowing how to get it, knowing where it's available.
Well, it's just, for me, it's a level set, because I could get all consumed with myself, and then boom, within a few minutes of a meeting, I'm thinking to myself, things are good. I'll take back all my problems in a nanosecond. compared to a lot of challenges that others are facing out there. And that's not to be negative about, thinking about what other people are facing. It's just to make sure I realize how fatal and progressive and disastrous life is if I don't really work at adhering to the 12 steps.
I want to check in with you and see if what I just heard is one way that you practice self-care is going to a place and actually forgetting about yourself. Almost
That's a good way of saying it, yeah. No, that's a great way. I can get on my knees and I go through the rote of doing what I'm told, even if it doesn't feel like I'm connecting or not. Mm-hmm. I like to do what I'm supposed to do, whether I feel like it or not. That's the big thing that's changed in my life. Like, I go to meetings whether I want to or not, just because I know the one consistent for me in the 13 and a half years I have permanent sobriety is that I've been going to meetings. And I don't know what it is that may have been the trick, but I don't want to take any chances.
Do you ever feel like, hey, I'm Patrick Kennedy. I don't have to do this. I can do anything I want.
All the time. No, that's my problem.
Okay.
That is my problem. So working out is also absolutely essential to me. So no matter how tired I am, I'll always get up a couple hours early so that I can work up a sweat and build the dopamine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of grit, a lot of self-determination. So let's say by this time, after you worked out, it's 10:30 a.m., and you can do anything you want the rest of the day. What are you doing?
Well, like I said, I have 5 kids, so
you kind of have to include them.
I know my day is often running when they get out of school, because they all have different activities, and I want to watch them.
So watching them is part of self-care for you, or something you really enjoy?
It's the best. These kids drag me out of myself. It's the greatest gift God's given me, to be able to be thinking about what do they need. That's not a normal. I'm in politics. I'm in a self-centered world where I want to, protect what I have and get what I want and all that me. And having kids is a miracle, because they just drag it out of you to look at them. And I'm also intentional about it. I'll sit in the playroom with my son, and I know when I go in there, I'll put the phone away, because he'll be playing with the Legos and he'll look up every minute or two to see if I'm watching him.
I'm familiar with that move.
And I want to be watching him when he looks up. And that, for me, is God working in my life.
Incredible. I've had the same experience with my 10-year-old, and you kind of think maybe I'm getting away with it. Maybe they think, oh, I'm in here, I'm present, I'm in his room, but I'm kind of just okay, what was that email? I just got to make sure I read it, and then. But I've had the same experience where you look up and you realize he's looking.
Yeah.
And then the difference between when my phone is away and I'm just looking, and then I'll ask, so what are you building? It looks like you're building this. The difference in his mood and his face,
right?
It's a gift. So that's the immediate feedback. Kids give you immediate and very honest feedback.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's getting close to the evening on this same day. You've watched some activities. You spent time with your kids. You going to bed at 8:30 again?
No, because my wife makes me stay up and watch HGTV.
What? This is going to be the whole interview now that you said that. What shows are we talking?
Oh, my God. Love It or List It. The Worst.
So good.
Fixer Upper.
Yes. Chip and Joanna.
What is that?
Close to my heart.
Horror houses and stuff.
Yeah, Unfixable. How about just some good old-fashioned House Hunters?
Yeah.
Just there's 1,000 episodes. If you have Discovery Plus isn't here, but I will put in a plug. It's my favorite streaming service, because it's almost if you want to recover from a hard day, You can watch people just like doing fake drama about moving to another country, and then just like that, just the narrator like Sam and Jesse are here finding they can't agree on
you've definitely
how many
watched,
bathrooms. Yeah.
You've definitely watched the same. We're stuck on it together.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm gonna call him. We're gonna check in on that. Yeah. What, Hannah? You're at HGTV. Hannah is default Gen Z representative on this podcast, and we got to pull her out of it every now and then. What are you thinking when you hear all this older self-care?
I love it. I'm here for it. Yeah. I don't personally watch any of those shows, but my parents do.
That's not the first time I've heard that.
Yeah.
Hey, have you heard of this? No, but I think my dad was telling me about that. Whatever. Okay, so do you watch the shows and then you just kind of get ready for the day? Do you talk about the shows after you watch them, or?
No, I mean, I have 5 kids. That's obviously I don't.
I'll stop making you go through this day.
Just watching TV.
Yes, I get it. You talked about being a politician, kind of the nature of that, and how it kind of can make you defensive, self-involved, because you got to look out. You're the one running for office. You were, I think still, you were the youngest member of Congress ever elected, and you were 21?
So I was 21 when I got elected to the state legislature in Rhode Island.
Okay, that was state legislature.
And then 27 when I got elected to the Congress.
That's right. Okay.
And it all had to do with my good looks and personality. Nothing to do with my last name being Kennedy.
No, you ran under a different name, I'm sure.
Yeah, I just had the power of persuasion.
Yeah. What was that like? What was that like going through your early 20s, state legislature, then going to D.C.? I mean, were people jealous, respectful, disrespectful? What was it like?
Yeah, no, there are people that loved me for no good reason, and people who hated me for no good reason. And, of course, I went into it to try to get validation that I'm okay. Which is not a good motivation to get in politics, because it's very hard to live in a life where you're judging yourself based upon how everyone around you feels about you. So I'd have an existential moment every event that I went to, because if I did great, I was great. If I bombed, I bombed.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a terrible way. So I used drugs and alcohol to try to cope with that.
Did you use it to celebrate the good days too and deal with the bad days?
Yeah, I used it for every reason in the world, like make the highs higher, to mitigate the lows, just to survive ultimately.
Yeah. You wrote a couple different books that I don't want to brag, but I've read, and they're very good.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes. The most recent one is this one here, Profiles in Mental Health Courage. And those of us, or those of the people who are listening who maybe don't understand where the title comes from, I'd love for you to explain just kind of how you chose that title, because I know it's important.
Well, President Kennedy wrote the Profiles in Courage, Pulitzer Prize-winning book about 8 U.S. senators who basically spoke out and voted against their own interests politically, like basically cast votes that were going to cost them their political careers in the interest of the national good.
Common good.
Common good. So I thought I'd first find out about who those 8 were before I ventured into borrowing the title that President Kennedy made famous. And I found out everyone that I could document had mental illness and addiction in their family.
Wow.
So my father, Senator Kennedy, Edward Kennedy, had all kinds of letters of Daniel Webster on his walls at his house, because Daniel Webster's for Massachusetts senator and one of the lead champions of the abolition movement. And Daniel Webster died of cirrhosis of the liver because of his alcoholism.
Yeah.
other profiles that President Kennedy had in there were Sam Houston, who was the first president of Texas before Texas was a state, and then later became the U.S. Senator. And he was known as the big drunk.
Okay.
John Quincy Adams, his president, there's John Quincy Adams, the president, his son, President Adams, his two brothers died of alcoholism, and he lost his son, John Washington Adams, to suicide at 28.
Wow.
Lucius Lamar, who was one of these big kind of Confederate Southerners who turned and really tried to build rapport with the Union after the Civil War in a way that was very healing, lost his father at age 8 when he saw his father take a gun to his head and take his life. And they're all documented in there. There's others. Everyone else has got something. So these are not in new issues,
Right.
we're first talking about. And it's remarkable that you all live at a time where this thing that has been plaguing all of our families forever is finally getting addressed. Alcoholism has been around for the beginning of time, let alone depression, anxiety, and other mental illnesses. And it is shocking that we have so managed to stuff it and ignore it, and we still do, especially in government policy. That's why I made the plea for political action, because if we get political action, we can then put the apparatus in to try to make the policy changes that all of you are discussing at this conference.
Speaking of alcoholism, addiction, and sort of ignoring it or sweeping it under the rug, I can't imagine, I've heard you talk a little bit about this before, but I can't imagine it was a safe thing for you to do to say publicly, I need help to deal with this, and I'm Patrick Kennedy. Like, what was that like to have to, I would imagine you had to keep it secret at some point. And
I wanted to keep it secret all the way through. And I never planned to be a mental health advocate when I got into politics. Frankly, the furthest thing from my mind. I wanted to be a champion for Meals on Wheels. I wanted to be, for the environment. I managed to keep a coal-fired power plant from being sited in my neighborhood. I mean, I was all into everything that you were supposed to be for as a good progressive. But I woke up one morning and I was on the cover of the National Enquirer. Patrick Kennedy, cocaine addict. Now, if they just said I was a run-of-the-mill alcoholic, I would have been all right with that.
A little better, yes.
But geez, did they have to say that I was a cocaine addict? Please.
So those Enquirers.
I thought it was going to be the end of my political career. So the guy that I went to drug rehab with at 17 sold his story of being in rehab with me. So there's a picture of him also on the front of the National Enquirer with the quotes, my time with Patrick Kennedy. So I thought, I'd been trying to keep that all in the closet. So I went over to my neighbor's house who had been so helpful to me getting elected, and I felt terrible because, of course, I didn't tell him that I was a drug addict. And I was terrified he was going to be shamed himself because he vouched for me under false pretenses. He didn't know who I really was. But I represented the most Italian-American community in the most Italian-American state. And the guy that I had as my campaign chair, who was also my treasurer, even though he never graduated from high school. He was my treasurer because under state law, you have to put your treasurer's name on all your bumper stickers and signs. And his name was Frank DiPaolo. And I wanted everybody to know that Frank DiPaolo was with Patrick Kennedy. So I made him my treasurer. So his name went next to mine on all my literature. So when I went to Frank's house, he wouldn't turn around and look at me, which I took as a bad sign. And then he muttered under his breath, that rat bastard. And he turned around and he held his hand in his hand. He said, buddy, you want me to do something about this? I kid you not, he literally said that. He said that. It's like I can picture like it was yesterday.
Frank.
And I immediately knew to say no. Although I was moved, I was touched that he was willing to go and break the guy's legs for me. So my next campaign was vote for Pat, not the rat. And I managed to win pretty overwhelmingly in
Wonderful.
my neighborhood.
That says a lot about the culture in the district.
Well, it helped me because then when I got elected to Congress, I could put my name on the Parity bill. In fact, I was the youngest member of Congress from the smallest state in the country, and yet my name went first on the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act, which by rights, more senior members should have had their names on. Because if there were senior members to me that had wanted their names on that bill, the decorum is that they get their names ahead of you. And one of the reasons why my father was the sponsor of more pieces of major social legislation than any other U.S. senator in history, because he was in the Senate for over 42 years.
Yeah.
And he was chairman of the Labor, Health, and Human Services, which covers all social issues. And so he was, he has a lot of bills to his name. But I had the parity law to my name because I could introduce it and they already knew my story. I mean, not my whole story, but a lot of it. But none of my colleagues wanted to go first because then the press would have asked them, do they have a mental illness? Do they have an addiction? Does someone in their family? And of course, no politician wants to go down that rabbit hole. And I even, when we had the bill come up for a vote on the House side, I had one of my colleagues who told me of his daughter's eating disorder and her suicide attempt, and he's a Republican, and he voted against the bill. And I went up to him later on. I said, hey, how come you voted against it? And he said, Patrick, I don't come from the same part of the country you come from. I come from the buckle of the Bible Belt. And in my area, they look at these issues as moral failings, not medical failings. And I'll never forget that.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing about that. I can't imagine what it'd be like to have a lot of responsibility, care a lot, and have to care a lot about what everyone thinks, and not be able to reach out for help. And then to get really kind of punished, which ultimately ended up being, from the sounds of it, one of your superpowers was that everyone knew your story and you weren't afraid to put your name on it.
Well, I was so blessed because whenever I went into a room, everybody knew I was an alcoholic. So every other, quote, secret friend of Bill's would come over to me and say hi. And then I realized, over time, I've met a lot of my colleagues in Congress who were also friends of Bill, but none of them knew each other. So I was like the only one that they knew because I had the dubious distinction of driving my car into the United States Capitol at 3 a.m. in the morning and getting arrested.
I'm surprised that even made the news.
Yeah, it's amazing. I tried to keep that one secret too. Yeah. Didn't work.
Wow. Before we get into the book, I just wanted to mention one other thing. In your family, I think people think, wow, what incredible, anytime I talk to someone and I'm on the East Coast, they say, you're going to go talk to someone, that's royalty for us, that's, the Kennedys. But I've also heard you talk about, I don't think people realize people dying early and people dying publicly. These are all people you loved and your family members. And there's a lot of trauma there.
Yeah, There's no doubt. I just lost my Aunt Ethel yesterday, and all the, I still can't believe it. I read all the obituaries of Ethel and what she endured, losing children to mental health issues, losing grandchildren. My cousin Saoirse died just a couple years ago, and she died. She was no more than 20 yards away from my house because we're all, packed in together. Mm-hmm. So, and I was with my cousin David the day before he was found from a drug overdose. And we were at my grandmother's house, and she had just had a stroke. And so I got the phone call because I went back to school 3 days later from my brother, and I thought he was calling to tell me that my grandmother had died. And he told me that David had just been found. So and then when my dad died, I was asked questions, and I really, without thinking about what I was saying, was talking about his trauma and how when I grew up we had bulletproof vests in all of our closets in case anyone stormed in. And I didn't think anything of it because that was just normal. But the thing that gives me so much purpose is having the chance to help others get what I was blessed to get. So one of the great privileges was having people tell me how they got denied insurance coverage, and me being able to call the insurance company and saying that I just met this person and they told me that they had been denied coverage, and I'm about to go to the floor to talk about it because they gave me permission. Of course, I made all this part of it up about how that insurance company had denied their care, because at this time I was sponsor of the Parity law. And they would say, wait, what's their number and name again? Okay. But I could only do that so many times a week. Where
I was going to say, you could probably have a full-time job.
I could threaten to go to the floor of the house and expose them. So it's of such, if nothing else in my life, I feel so blessed to have had a chance to know Marty Walsh, who's also in recovery. I can say that because it's public, who tried to reach out to me many times, whose cell phone I have. And Marty Walsh got named by Joe Biden as the Secretary of Labor when he first got elected. And among other things at Department of Labor is the oversight of ERISA plans through an agency called the Employee Benefit Security Administration, which regulates 80% of our health insurance in this country. And I had already prepared what EPSA should do to enforce the federal mental health parity law. And when he got elected, went in there when he first got elected, when he named, and I gave him all the things that needed to be done, and he did them. And 3 months ago, President Biden released this rule, by the way, that no one in our community knows, that is going to go further than anything else to guarantee that Americans do not have to wait longer or jump through more hoops than to get care than they would if they were trying to get an appointment for someone to see someone for diabetes or asthma or heart disease or cancer. So important. That's incredible. But, here's how it matches up with California. So you have 855, it was passed. Governor Newsom signed into law. Senator Weiner from San Francisco was the author of, among others. And that really helps implement the parity law here in California. So when I talk about advocacy, Darrell Steinberg's a champ. He's the mayor of Sacramento. He helped pass Prop 63, which was the key to the millionaire's tax, which has put $4.5 billion into mental health in this state every year. And his name is Darrell Steinberg. He is my hero. Mm-hmm. And our community doesn't know Darrell Steinberg, but I'm just, some of the folks who are most intimately involved do, but like he deserves like so much credit because his work has opened up more access to care than any other, and frankly, almost myself included, because in California, that kind of money is bigger than the federal money that we've been getting all these years. It's amazing to think. LA County has a bigger budget for mental health than the United States Department of Substance Abuse and Mental Health. So, so when you guys fight for stuff, and everyone thinks California's way off its lefty rocker, thank God, because you guys are like setting up some templates that other states can learn from and adopt. And we need more innovation in policy to be experimented with because everyone else has such a natural inclination to conservatorship. They don't want to take risks. That's just our human nature. So that's true of states and politics. So the fact that California is always trying to do a little bit more helps so much. So when you're campaigning for stuff here in California, understand you're not just helping your fellow Californians. You're helping your fellows from all over the country.
You had a whole session on CYBHI and what's happening here with youth mental health just 2 weeks ago in D.C. for people from all around the country and around the world.
Well, states are going to learn from each other, and of course Washington's paralyzed, and there's not a lot happening all the time there. But so states can be real laboratories for innovation. And we need to come up with new ways to pay for mental health. So one of my thoughts is that we don't want to just pay for mental health through the insured dollar, because mental health has so many other implications on the workforce productivity, other economic costs to society. So if we spend money just in the healthcare spend, we're not spending the kind of money we need in order to get the ROI in those other areas. So let's say the state puts up additional money to supplement the premium dollar for mental health. Thank you, Blue Cross Blue Shield, for your sponsorship here, or Kaiser, but the savings could come not just in the reduction in ER visits, but the reduction in jail or prison recidivism. The savings could come in the reduction of future foster care budgets. The savings could come in the reduction of special ed costs. But we never monetize that. And the real answer for all that you're fighting for at this conference is financing. If anyone said, Congressman, tell me the most important policy you heard here at this conference, I'd say the one that was really rarely discussed, and that's how we going to finance the system. Because we don't really need to worry about whether this type of therapy or that type of therapy works. We only need to have a system that captures the true return on investment over 5 years or so, as opposed to the 1 year that insurance currently measures. And if we did that and we had these risk-bearing contracts, then guess what? It'll be the interest of Blue Cross Blue Shield or Kaiser or whoever to invest in those things, not because we say that's what they should do, but because they know that's what's going to reduce their financial exposure.
It changes the incentives.
I think the whole criminal justice system, which pays for heads in beds, if we want to stop having our criminal justice system be such that the United States is the world's leader of industrialized nations for the percentage of its population in jail and prison, what we ought to do is have risk contracts for justice-involved populations where if you keep your recidivism down by a certain percent, you get to pocket some of the money. If the capitalist system said, do whatever you got to do, pay for whatever you got to pay for to keep someone from getting reincarcerated, believe me, they'd figure out what it was, and they'd do it. And so that's how we reform our criminal justice system. And frankly, we need to put that in an amendment and get it ready for the George Floyd Act for whenever we ultimately pass that bill. So that's the kind of policy making that we need. And I've tried to use the Parity law as a way to convene all the stakeholders because I want us to develop, like I said earlier, an AFL-CIO of policy so that when Kamala Harris and Tim Walz become the new president and vice president of the United States, we can, day one, because I've known Tim for a long time, he's a friend of mine, say, we want you to do a White House conference on mental health next year, because it's going to take a year. We want these stages for you to bring in all the payers, to bring in all the business roundtable, which is the top Fortune 100 companies, because they're going to move things as much as anyone. They have a financial interest in this issue, but they need to be heard. So Republicans and Democrats stand up and listen. Because Bank of America says we need this done, right? Not NAMI, but Bank of America says we need this done. And so we need to just organize. And I'm proud to say Tim Walz was my keynote speaker at my conference last year. He spent 4 hours with us. I took him through the whole thing. No one knew who the hell Tim Walz was. They're like, why the hell we have this governor from the Midwest? And it's only because I knew I could get him to come, because he probably had nothing better to do at the time. And like as God would have it, because again, I had no way of controlling these things, Tim Walz is going to be the game changer here. I've tried my best to get President Biden, given the fact we all know how he suffered, his family has suffered, to run towards this, because he's done more for us than any other president. But he's still not comfortable talking about it. And this was when he was still in. I told his whole staff, Hunter Biden is your best chance at re-election. And they're like, what? There's no way. Hunter Biden is keep him out of the conversation. Shh, keep him. I said, you're missing it. I said, if President Biden hosted parents in 5 of the biggest swing states and had them talk about the disease of addiction in those families and what it did to them, and at the end of each of those, President Biden said, I know what you're talking about because I've been through it too, and as your next president, I'm going to do these 5 things to try to change it. Boom. Whatever they say about Joe Biden, he could have been reelected because this issue is so personal to so many on both sides of the aisle.
Is it still a bipartisan issue?
So, as I said earlier, my wife ran for Congress. Very polarizing election. The district she ran in is very, very red. So she didn't win, but she gave it her best. I belong to my local parish, Catholic Church, and the lady that runs the choir with her husband who plays the guitar play at the Lambs of God rallies, which are out in front of Planned Parenthood clinics. So I'm pro-choice, women's reproductive health, and I was denied communion by my church because when I was a congressman, I was for marriage equality and choice, so that pretty much definitely threw me out. And she got my book because it was a big little thing in the town, and her son was in crisis, and she came to me. She said, can you help him? I said, right now you got to help him because he may change his mind, he may disappear. Where is he? Let's go get him. And I know the hospital president. I got him right in. I know the head of the rehab down the street. And I told him, your bottom line, I helped. You got a scholarship, this guy. Okay. Got him. 4 years after that, I'm baptizing my newest child, and He's standing there next to me with his baby, and his right-wing evangelical parents are weeping and wrap their arms around me. And they said, whatever you ever need, we will be with you. Because our son has 4 years of sobriety. His life is saved, and we now have a grandchild. We will do anything for you.
That's powerful.
And I just say that to prove the point that there's nothing more powerful than this issue. I often am on Fox News, believe it or not, because I'm one of the very few Democrats who's against commercialization of marijuana. I'm for decriminalization, but I am 1,000% opposed to creating a new big tobacco that markets marijuana products to our kids and thinks that it's okay. So Fox News loves to have me on, obviously, because I'm their token Democrat to say what they want to have said. But every time I get off the set, my phone lights up, and I realize all of my fellows in recovery are Fox News watchers, which means they're also not politically in the same camp I'm in. Mm-hmm. But I never knew that.
But that unites
because it doesn't matter.
Right.
I'll love them and do anything I could for them.
Imagine relationships going deeper than politics and not allowing beliefs to separate us. Imagine that. That's incredible. We have a few questions from people, and I think Hannah, did you want to read a couple of those?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, the first one is, how challenging has it been to break barriers among cultures and the insurance companies to provide mental resources?
So at the end of the day, as I keep saying, this is a political issue because it's political will. Like civil rights, Voting Rights Act, Fair Housing Act is not here today because suddenly America woke up and said, maybe we should all treat each other the same regardless of the color of our skin. It happened because we had Dr. King and Andy Young and a whole host of others put their bodies on the line, raise America's consciousness, and the laws change. Racism is still alive and well, but it's illegal to discriminate, to take those bigoted positions and act on them. That's what we need to do with mental health. You're not going to change people's personal attitudes because all of us who grow up in alcoholic homes who know people with the disease of addiction are not a very sympathetic lot. It's easy to really despise them and not want to do anything for them. Hence, the number of people who are walking on our streets, who we walk by like they're nobody. So what we got to do is we can't think we can change our attitudes to make difference. We got to change our laws and normalize a new way of operating that just changes practice. Because if we're waiting to change culture and attitudes, we'll be waiting another 50 years. Everyone can say that we've made a big turning point with COVID. Frankly, I don't believe that. Stigma is as live today as ever. And my book, one more plug for the book.
It's good.
The reason I did the book is because 99% of the stories I see in this space are self-edited, whitewashed versions of the real story. In addition to that, we don't hear the family and friends and coworker perspective. I made it very clear that this story was going to be not just about the person with the diagnosis, struggling to find care, struggling with relationships with family. I was going to tell that story also by talking to that person's family members and their coworkers. And that gives a more realistic, because I want people who are reading this, no matter what their diagnosis, and we have all different types of diagnoses and backgrounds, to know the real story, because it's messy. It's not an easy, happy ever after, oh, everything's great or everything's bad. It's a mix. And we need to have people with a more realistic portrayal. And the people who I chose to finally put in this all did a fantastic job.
No, they were very brave and actually courageous. There's 12 profiles in there. I don't want to choose favorites, and I know you can't, and I got the chance to hear from a number of the folks in the book that you wrote about and interviewed. My favorite chapter, since I'm allowed to have that, is chapter 4, and is Miss Tony's story. And I don't know, I have a quote, which is my favorite quote from the entire book, that I want to read, but can you tell us a little bit about Miss Tony and just sort of the connection there and her road to recovery?
Well, I can just say, like, Miss Tony and I have gone around to do some book events together, and she just, every time, just so humbling, because she'll get up and say, I never thought anyone would care less about my story or even listening to me, because I spent years living on a park bench, selling my body to pay for drugs. But I've got a platform now, and I am spending my life helping other women who are just like me come out of Rikers Island. Mm-hmm. And now when they come and see me and tell me their sob stories, I can tell them they ain't seen nothing till they met Miss Tony, because Miss Tony has had countless children taken away from her because of her disease of addiction and horrendous trauma. She grew up, was the oldest of 7 siblings, and was in charge of babysitting all of her siblings. And one day, one of her little brothers ran out in the middle of the road and got run over. And her parents basically disowned her after that, because she felt responsible for obvious reasons. She carried that shame. Mm-hmm. I think she probably had as most people do with these illnesses, a predisposition to addiction, and she had mental illness, which she didn't find out till after she got her addiction treated properly. But of course, toxic stress, and stress in general, is like living with asbestos and having a predisposition for lung cancer, right? So toxic stress combined with the genetic predisposition. So when we talk about solving for these problems, we got to solve for them medically, but we got to solve for them environmentally. And we've got we need a whole new system so that we're not just treating these as medical issues, which I know is part of what this audience is talking about.
Absolutely. Miss Tony said something when she was talking to you, and I want to read it. She said, relationship is a word that is often defined for us early, and it takes a lot to relearn a relationship. The same thing or concept that was the source of intense pain, that same concept of closeness and to be known can also heal as we learn that the relationship is the cure. And she says here, as we heal and learn, we have the cure because it is also the poison.
Well, it's lived experience. So she's able to... So 5 years after I left Congress, and I left because my addiction was progressive, and I went to over 7 rehabs while I was in Congress. When no one was looking, I tried to hide, go away during vacations and so forth. And I ultimately couldn't get any long-term sobriety, so I left Congress, and then my permanent sobriety started after I left Congress. But I thought it was the end of the world. I left Rhode Island, left Washington, moved to a different place, went to meetings all the time, thought all my best days were behind me. Mm. And 5 years into recovery, I get a call from Nancy Pelosi. And she said, Patrick, I need you to come down here and talk to one of our colleagues. And when I went and talked to them, I didn't tell them what to do. I didn't tell them how bad the disease was and how it's going to catch them if they didn't do something about it. I just told them about my story, living with that 800-pound gorilla on my back, morning, noon, and night. And because I was a congressman, this congressperson was listening to me. Mm-hmm. I knew from having written my book that none of my staff could approach me because I was their boss, or none of frankly, even the mental health advocates who would lobby me, who knew I was a wreck, could tell me. So this is where we all have an opportunity to save others, given, like we say in recovery, we shall not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it, because it is our greatest strength in helping others who feel unique, who don't think that anyone can understand how special they are, because someone else in the rooms have had that experience and can smash that idea that they're somehow different from everyone else. We're all garden variety alcoholics. So, anyway, I found so much, and I've been able to be there for senior people who also felt like they couldn't share because of their quote-unquote position, and I could call them up and say, you got to get with the program.
And you have and continue to help so many, and I think people here today, again, with strength and vulnerability. Would you, before you go, you've told us a couple stories about people that have helped you. Is there another story you can tell us just about someone who has helped you?
Well, my wife has saved my life many times, just because it's really important that you have partnerships with your family. And I go to meetings, and I learn a lot of my fellows in recovery do not always have the support they need at home. So I told you about how I was denied, maybe I didn't say this, but I was basically denied communion by the bishop in Rhode Island, Bishop Tobin. And after my book came out, I got a handwritten note from a cardinal saying how great my book was. And I'm like, whoa, he clearly did not Google Patrick Kennedy Catholic. Mm-hmm. And guess what his last name was? Tobin. Not the same Tobin, a different Tobin. And I can say this because he's public about it. But he asked me to come to visit with him. I went and visited with him, and he had this great credenza with this big ivy plant all over. I said, wow, that's quite a ivy plant. He said, do you know where I got that ivy plant? I said, where? He goes, that comes from Bill W.'s ivy plant. It's a clipping from Bill W.'s ivy plant. So needless to say, we were talked for 3 hours after that.
Incredible.
And then I said, Cardinal, we're losing. No one's coming to the Catholic Church anymore. I take my kids. We're the youngest people in the group. I said, the Catholic Church can't be about saving people with addiction. They got to have medical and mental health. But it can help save the family members. Mm-hmm. And, I belong to a lot of 12-step groups I qualify for, but there is a major impact of growing up in an alcoholic home, and we should do a much better job at, like the ACEs, kind of screening kids where we can as members of a family without the disease of alcoholism. And if it's just older family members, fine, but the church could be a vehicle to help support in a community and facilitate meetings, because I can't find many Al-Anon meetings, so I can easily find an AA meeting or an NA meeting. He said, that's a great idea. I said, the Catholic Church, they need a mission, and lepers of today are people living on our street with mental illness and addiction, the church should be like, they do a lot through Catholic Charities, but I'm just saying, like, could really help break stigma by being much more understanding and proactive, not only in the intentions, which you start to hear them doing more and more. He said, that's great. Do you want to talk to the Pope? And I said, yeah. I said, I also like the idea of getting the Catholic school system to embed social emotional learning, because we can't always get it done as aggressively as we want in the public education system because of all of the bureaucracies. But through fiat, the Catholic Church could just, boom, do this. And we could learn from the Catholic Church school system if they did it successfully and were able to show the outcomes. He said, that's a great idea. And of course, it wasn't my idea. I just steal it from other people and try to take credit for it. So anyway, he set up a private meeting for me with Pope Francis in 2 weeks.
2 weeks, yeah.
And I'm going to ask him to do a Vatican conference on addiction. And I don't know if any of it's going to work. But I also did not think that I was going to get a cardinal reach out to me. And in the meantime, you wouldn't even believe it, I just spoke to the National Convention of Archbishops about expanding treatment for priests and other clergy.
I'm hearing an incredible theme here, Patrick, and that you're sharing with us. It's almost like these moments where having an addiction, dealing with addiction, has become the worst and lowest point of people finding out, but then it has motivated you to then help yourself and others. But then even again, beyond the politics, being denied communion at your church had to have been, I mean, that's like we talked about relationship poison. That's like, I have a relationship here and they're doing something that doesn't feel good.
No, like my life, I dropped out of Georgetown because I couldn't hack it. And then I was languishing and I felt like a loser. Chris Dodd, who's my dad's friend, went to Providence College. He said, why don't you go to Providence College, a little school? I said, okay. So I went to Providence. The rest of my life was different. I ended up being a congressman. And then when I tried to get the Parity law passed, I went to Chris Dodd. Chris Dodd was head of the banking committee. And we were up against the 11th hour trying to get the HR 1424, the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity, passed. And Chris Dodd wrote the whole $800 billion bailout of our nation's banks during the 2008 banking crisis into HR 1424, guaranteeing the passage of the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act. It never would have passed otherwise because the insurance lobby, the most powerful lobby in Washington, D.C., would never have allowed it. So God's grace, because of that financial disaster and the need to bail the economy out, and Chris Dodd being my dad's best friend in the Senate and have helped me go to his alma mater, and who I served with when I came to him, was willing to write the whole banking bill, Economic Stabilization Act, into the Parity law, passing it. And so all I'm saying is none of that's an accident. And when I pray, I thank God for the guy's name is Rob Remy. That's the rat guy that ratted me out. One of the best things that ever happened to me. When I thought my life was over because I had to leave Congress and leave the big title and leave all the staff and all that stuff, I thought it was the end of the world. Best thing that ever happened to me, because then I got married, then I had kids, I learned a new way of living, then I got more into the advocacy, which I love. So all I'm saying is, whatever our best laid plans, throw them out the window, because you just got to buckle up and wait for your life to unfold, and not to try to hold on too tight to what you think your life is supposed to be, because it never turns out the way you want. And thank God, because what you want may not be what you ultimately need.
That's incredible. Thank you, Patrick, for being here. Your openness courage to deal with and be in recovery and keep going back and keep making those changes. We couldn't be more honored to have you here today. And these stories are life-changing. And again, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope it helped. Stay connected with us at thishelpspodcast.com.